Guess who missed a dose of their thyroid medication yesterday? I'm just gonna take a nap right here. If I seem like a little sleepy in this video, just bear with me, because that's why. Do you ever get used to the pain? What do injuries feel like? Does it ever get better? Okay, let's talk about chronic pain. I've gotten a lot of questions over the years about my diagnoses and what it's like to live with chronic pain, so I thought this would be an interesting topic to dive into a little bit further. I hope that this video feels helpful to you in some way, whether you are a person who also lives with chronic pain and appreciates hearing similarities and differences in other people's experiences, or you're a person who maybe has a loved one with chronic pain and you just want to learn more about it. I'm going to give you some history and context first about my conditions, how and when they developed, and kind of what the journey has been like since then. If I dove into all of it, this video would probably be like 7 hours. So I'm going to try my best to summarize, and then after that I will dive into some of your questions. If I'm just like yapping and you're like, I kind of secretly just want to get to the questions, there will be timestamps linked in the description. Feel free to skip around as you please. I promise it will not offend me. Okay, so I started having symptoms of chronic illness when I was a small child. I had a pretty serious case of RSV when I was a couple months old, and after that my immune system just kind of didn't seem to function at full capacity. We suspect that I contracted Lyme disease when I was between the ages of 5 and 7, given that that's when I was traveling somewhat often to a highly tick populated area. I was spending a lot of that time playing in the forest with my cousins, and given the busyness and sort of chaos of our travels, it's possible that those initial signs and symptoms could have been missed. We didn't end up actually testing for it until I was well into my adult life, which is a whole separate conversation for another time. But because of this, there's unfortunately no way of knowing exactly when I contracted it definitively, but there's a lot of signs that point towards that time frame making sense, so it's kind of what I have to work with. I was really sick a lot during this time, and even when I was well, I didn't feel well. I would say to my mom a lot things like, I just don't feel good. I didn't really have the words for it at the time, but looking back, I remember it just feeling like I had the flu all the time, just really nauseous and that kind of icky feeling. My system was really overly sensitive to things like stress, injury, and illness. It would take me a really long time to recover from things, and when something knocked me down, it was abnormally hard to get back up. When I was, I think, 8 or 9, I started having these really intense crash and burn type of episodes where one minute I was completely fine and the next I was not there anymore, being rushed to the hospital level of not doing good. We eventually figured out that it was actually my blood sugar tanking out of nowhere. So it was basically an extreme case of hypoglycemia that they said that I would eventually grow out of. I pretty much just had to make sure that I always had a snack on me and that kind of thing. The next couple of years were actually pretty stable. I was really focused on school and practicing my instruments, and ended up playing competitive volleyball for a while. Then between the ages of 14 and 19, so much happened in my life that honestly just spiraled everything completely out of control. It was like a shitstorm of illness and trauma and just complete lack of coping skills and regulation tools, and I just was not equipped for all of that to be happening at the same time. The illness stuff picked back up again and started with a migraine that lasted for 5 months, and that spiraled into widespread chronic pain, brain fog, fatigue, and a ridiculously long list of other symptoms. And because I had zero concept at the time of things like pacing myself and resting and setting and maintaining boundaries, I completely burned myself out repeatedly. It's a pattern that I'm still honestly trying to unlearn, but gosh, am I doing so much better with it now. Sometimes I wish I could just like info dump everything that I've learned into younger me. To sum up the rest of the story, which is what the last like 10 or so years have been like, how do I even do that? I guess the best way I can think to describe it is if you picture a couple different roller coasters that were designed really badly. So they're all like weaving in and out of each other, and there's no shut off for them. So they're constantly running. And each time the carts go on their own path, you don't know if they're going to collide with a cart from one of the other roller coasters. And you don't have any sort of control panel that helps you to navigate the speed or the direction of the different carts. So you just kind of have to like sit back and hope that they don't collide. But of course, they do collide quite often and cause little explosions and things. But after this, the carts don't just stop. They just kind of keep going on and on. So you're in charge of what's happening here, but it just feels like you have zero control whatsoever. That's genuinely the best way I can think to describe it. Over the last 10 years or so, I've been diagnosed with, I think, about like 7 chronic conditions. It's just like a constant feeling of responsibility for something that is acting out of its own free will, as if it's its own separate entity, but it's not a separate entity. It's me. So it's been a very confusing way to exist. For sure. I've done a variety of treatments over the years, and we've been able to put together some really helpful pieces about what's actually been causing the pain. Some of the treatments have been really helpful, and others have been wildly unhelpful and even harmful. It's definitely been an uphill battle for a lot of it, I would say. But I will also say that I haven't stopped living either. I really genuinely love the life that I have. Certain parts of it feel horrible at times, and I think every person, whether you have chronic illness or not, has their own chaos and struggles that make life feel really bizarre and random and unfair. I can't say that I've always loved being alive, especially with this constant reminder of how bizarre and random and ow, literally as I'm talking, like losing hearing in my right ear. Especially with this constant reminder of how bizarre and random and unfair life often is. But I think that what I've learned is that both can be true at the same time. Life can be extremely cruel, and at the same time, it can be the most wonderful thing. For me, that shows up when I'm making my music. That shows up when I'm spending time with my loved ones and laughing so hard that my cheeks hurt, which, by the way, is the only type of pain that I'm totally cool with. It shows up when I'm watering my plants or cuddling with my kitties. I am genuinely very happy to be alive at this time in my life. And it's not because my suffering went away. It's because I learned how to allow space for both. I learned, and I'm honestly still learning, how to actually take care of myself and be kind to myself when the pain is really loud, in the same way that I would care for and be kind to a friend that's going through a hard time. I'm learning how to actually be present with the good times as well, which is really a lot harder than you would think. It's been a really long process for me, and like I said, it's definitely still ongoing, but I want you to know that if you're in a place right now where the suffering is just filling the entire room, it's okay to let it just fill the entire room. Let it be loud. Let it have a lot to say. Take some time to listen to it to whatever extent you're able without it fully consuming you, and know that at some point the joy will make its way back in. Promise it will. Okay, now that we've had a good little like chit chat cry session, I told you I was gonna yap. I literally told you that I was gonna yap. Okay, and now I'm gonna yap some more with these questions. Let's get to the Q&A. Okay, the first question I received is, do you ever get used to the pain, or like Do you forget that it's there? Yes and no. I'm pretty much always aware of it, but there are times that my focus is more concentrated on something else. Several people and doctors over the years have been like,
well, have you tried just thinking about the pain less?
or some variation of insinuating that a hyperfocus on the pain is actually what's causing or reinforcing it, which is a line of thinking that I just don't personally believe in because it directly contradicts both my experience and the experience of other people that I've talked to. There have been so many times where I've been as focused as I possibly can be on something else because, like I said, I haven't stopped living, you know? I spend time with my friends, I have projects that I work on, I write music, and through all of that, the pain is still there. It just kind of often becomes more of like background noise, if that makes sense. But typically, as soon as the distraction is removed, the pain is like right there again. I've experienced a lot of dissociation over the years, partially from pain and partially from CPTSD. So during those times, I'm pretty checked out, but that's kind of like more of a disconnection from everything. So I view that as something that has protected me at times, but also comes with a level of consequence. The closest that I get to fully disconnecting from the pain, but while still remaining connected to something, is probably when I'm working on music. So to answer your question, yes and no, and it's sort of complicated. The next question is, what do injuries feel like? Is it like regular pain, but a lot worse? It's difficult to say exactly how it differs from the average person's experience with injury because I don't have a whole lot of clear memories of that sort of thing before the pain started. But what I can speak to is that when there's a specific injury that happens, like taking a minor example of stubbing my toe, the pain will often radiate up my leg into different areas of my body, and the initial sensation can sometimes stay like that for up to a couple hours. And if that happens when there's already something else going on, like for example,
Missing a dose of my thyroid medication.
Take a nap right here.
Just gonna take a nap right here.
Just gonna take a nap.
Just gonna take a nap right here.
Sometimes when I get really sleepy, I just start talking country. I just start talking real country. It's just like a reflex, I guess. Anyways. And if that happens when there's already something else going on, I'm more likely to see my symptoms domino into more of an extended flare. So I have to be extremely careful, especially with higher risk things. AKA, you will probably never see me making a skydiving or bungee jumping vlog. But to answer your question, I don't think any of that is necessarily representative of the typical human experience, but everyone's individual relationship to pain, chronic illness or not, is still completely valid. The next question is there anything that helps? Definitely. These things are going to be different for each person dealing with chronic pain, and for me, it still often can be like a day-by-day thing as far as like what's working and what's not working. If you have chronic pain, let me know if it's like this for you too, but I could find something that feels like it's working super well for like a week or two, and then it just all of a sudden stops working, and I'm like, rude. So over time, I've developed a really large toolbox of things that generally feel helpful, and when I'm flaring, I just pull out like as many tools as I possibly can and like throw everything at it, and some combination of them usually does at least something, which actually leads me into the next question, which is what things are must-haves in your arsenal for pain management? A couple of the things in my toolbox are heating pads, ice packs, muscle relaxing herbs. I have tried pharmaceutical muscle relaxers as well, and I don't remember having like a bad reaction to them. The herbal blends have just been like more effective for me personally. Anti-inflammatory foods and teas, myofascial release work has been fantastic. Pendulation meditation exercises, tapping, and other non-activating EMDR techniques. Again, everybody's toolbox is going to look a little bit different. Those are a couple of the things that really help me a lot. I would love to hear in the comments what's in your toolbox. The next question is, does it help your pain if you're consistently working out / walking each day? So yes and no, and Sort of. Consistency and chronic illness don't tend to be friends in my experience, especially when it comes to something like working out. As a former competitive volleyball player, this is one of the hardest parts of it for sure, because I used to love working out so much. I still feel like it can be a really therapeutic practice when done in a healthy and mindful way. I think the problem that a lot of chronically ill people can run into is the sort of vicious cycle of trying to achieve consistency and maybe seeing some improvement and then experiencing a crash and burn response, sometimes when we didn't even think that we were overdoing it, and then being afraid to enter that space again, and then going through periods of being stagnant and feeling the negative effects from that, and trying to reestablish consistency again, and then the cycle just repeats and repeats and repeats. I've had some times where I was able to do 20-minute sets on the treadmill a couple times a day for like a couple weeks straight, and did pretty okay with that. And then I've had other times where just doing 5 minutes at like the slowest pace possible has induced heart rate spikes and left me on the verge of passing out. Long story short, I do notice that movement in general does help to keep my blood flowing and reduces the amount of like allodynia and nerve pain that I experience. And in theory, building up physical strength and muscle could definitely help my situation overall. But the question is just, how do we get there safely? Because it's almost become a running joke at this point that the only consistency that my body is receptive to is the consistent hospital trips and burnout that happen when I try to consistently work out. So there's a couple things that I've done to adjust my thinking surrounding working out and consistency that help me to get as close as possible to something resembling consistency, but without all the negative outcomes. It's been helpful for me to prioritize some level of movement and some level of strength building every day, or most days, but while allowing room for the types and the amounts of movement and strength building to be completely different every day. Does that make sense? So there is consistency in the fact that something is being worked on regularly, but with acceptance that it's not necessarily going to move in a linear path. Each day, or again, most days, I choose something that feels natural and manageable for that day. Some days that's walking for 5 minutes, some days that's walking for a couple sets of 20 minutes, some days that's just kind of moving and dancing to whatever music I have on. Some days it's just sitting in my chair and doing shoulder rolls, or standing up and like wiggling in between long recording sessions. And even instrumentation can provide movement as well. For strength, my physical therapist has been so helpful in finding really gentle exercises that target more of like the smaller muscle groups, and ones that I can do seated or lying down so that I can work on building my muscles up, but not with like high cardio, high impact exercises like weightlifting, push-ups, and that sort of thing. We're working a lot right now on strengthening my core and my back through things like band pull-aparts, and even this sort of thing like squeezing the shoulder blades together and doing small circles to gently work the muscles that have been overstretched with like long-term postural issues. So yeah, that was a very long answer to that question, but I hope that all made sense. The last question is, does it ever get better? My answer to this question is yes, but not always in the ways that we're expecting. So like I was saying earlier, there will always be some level of pain in our lives, whether that be physical, emotional, or something else. I think that if our goal is to be pain-free, or to find that one thing that's going to magically make everything better, we can sometimes end up putting our entire life on hold as we're waiting for the day that the pain isn't there anymore. And we can start to plan our entire life around the things that we might be able to do one day if and when the pain isn't there anymore. I spent a lot of time doing this, waiting and waiting for the cure, and that mindset honestly just caused me to get really stuck. So at some point I started moving more into a place of acceptance. Now I see a lot of people mistaking acceptance for giving up, not wanting to accept their circumstances out of fear that this might mean that they're giving up. And I think that it's really important to reframe this in a kinder way. Acceptance is not giving up. I think that there's a really healthy balance that can be found between remaining optimistic and hopeful about the possibility of improvement happening and embracing the idea that where I'm at right now is completely acceptable and valid. It makes sense. And even if it doesn't feel good, I trust that I have the tools to get through it. Something that I've been working on for a little while now is my ability to sit with discomfort. You would think that after over 10 years of chronic pain, I would have that concept completely figured out by now, but I'm actually realizing that I've developed a lot of avoidant behaviors surrounding pain and discomfort, which I think is super understandable since I literally cannot avoid the pain that is with me all day, every day. I've gotten into a lot of patterns of consistently trying to change or fix what I'm experiencing instead of just feeling it, which can show up sometimes as being really hyper focused on the future, like where am I going, what's next, and then asking those why questions of like, why is this happening, why is my pain flaring, why aren't my tools working, because if I can figure out the cause, then I can maybe change it, right? And look, those aren't the worst things to be thinking about. I'm definitely a very future oriented person at this point in my life. Thinking about what my future could look like really excites me and brings me a lot of hope, but I do have to check in with that sometimes and be like, am I doing this for healthy movement, growth, and change? Or am I doing this because I'm avoiding the discomfort of the present moment? My pain isn't great today, and I'm spending all of my time trying to figure out why it's happening and how to fix it and how to prevent it from happening again. And again, it's good to tune in sometimes to the why and to the what can I do to improve this, but also I have a pain condition. It's gonna flare sometimes. It might be as simple as that. It sucks and it's uncomfortable, and it might be a good time to go a little easy on myself and rest and play some video games and just let the pain exist, you know? So to answer the question, does it get better? Yes, it definitely gets better. And then it gets worse again sometimes. And then it gets better again. And it doesn't always make sense to me, but what I do know is that you are super strong and you are gonna get through it. It's important to build up that toolbox of things that bring you relief or comfort or even just distraction. It's important to build up your support system so that you don't have to go through it alone. If you're having trouble connecting with people in your local community, there's some awesome online support groups for pretty much every like physical condition and mental health issue out there. There's like chronic illness support groups, PTSD support groups, social media pages that you can engage with. If you're struggling with chronic pain, I'm sending you all the spoons today. I hope this video helped you in some way to feel seen or feel less isolated. And if you don't have chronic pain, but you stuck around just to try and understand better, thank you so much. Seriously, I appreciate you so much. Until next time, take a deep breath. And know that it's gonna be okay. Okay, bye.